Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good? Oh, that's a good thing. That's what we're here today talking about, sleeping well. I'm really excited to be here this morning and over-caffeinated because I wanted to compensate the lack of sleep. So to really talk about a topic that is dear to all of us is quality sleep. And as much as it's dear to us, is as elusive as funding for a woman-led startup. That's how I feel, and I'm going to say it. And of course, the universe seems to have a sense of humor because we're here talking about sleep and lack of sleep. The morning after daylight saving time kicks in, so we're all feeling a little fragile this morning. And what I want to discuss with this amazing panel is really the role of technology in making us more aware of the importance of good sleep. And at the same time, why we need to sleep well, the impact that not sleeping properly is going to have on us as individuals, but also as a community and for the organizations that we all happen to work for. So if we're starting with the fact that over the past couple of years, we've had a couple of things. One, the push after COVID of all of us as consumers to really want to be more active in the role that we play in our own health. And so with that, we turn to technology to help us monitor all the different things that we're doing. At the same time, we've seen more and more headlines really focusing on sleep and putting sleep almost like a celebrity ingredient of our well-being. Because the reality is that from a sleep perspective, it's not just, we're going to have a good night's sleep. It's really impacting anything from heart disease to weight control and weight management, mental well-being. And that has an impact, as I said, on the people that are around us, as well as our productivity at work. So today, I have the honor to have these esteemed panelists with me. So I encourage you to fluff up your imaginary pillows and get comfortable as we are welcoming Dr. Han Park from Samsung. He is the Senior Vice President and Head of Digital Health Group at Samsung MX. And he's really the brain behind the health vision that Samsung has. And then I have Vanessa Hill, who is something that I'm just amazed by. She is an award-winning science communicator, because we need those. We need to understand the impact and importance of science in a way that we all consumers understand. And she's also a sleep scientist. And then I have John Lopez, who is the CEO of the National Sleep Foundation. So please help me welcome our panelists. Before we dive in, I want to ask you to stay till the end for two reasons. One, there's a reception with food and drinks, so worth it. But the second one, if you're into gadgets, there is the opportunity to see the Galaxy Ring that Samsung will be bringing later on in the year. So if you're not here for the gadgets, stay for the food. Let's start with why, and I'm going to start with you, Han. Why is sleep important, and why are we struggling so much to have quality sleep?
Yeah, I would say I want to separate the why in two different areas. One is why is sleep becoming more and more important? And I think the growing evidence is now linking physiology or changes that we can now actually measure to the actual chronic disease, whether it's dementia, heart disease, whether it's weight management control. We now understand, for example, hunger hormones called ghrelin and leptin that actually regulate or give you perception of fullness, as an example. And we now understand how poor sleep actually impacts the regulation of those hormones. So we now actually understand at a much more granular level, and then understanding the sleep and its correlation to disease like dementia. So I think that's that. The other is that, I think society's gotten busier, right? And we just lead very busy lives, and I think all of us know that, and we're overstimulated by things from social media to, number of different things. And I think those things has made sleep a major issue. I'll give you a quick example. When I was an intern, I was a first year, I just graduated from medical school and I was an intern, and I remember the attending on a Sunday morning comes in very fresh, got great sleep. We were post-call, so we had no sleep or very little sleep, and he started quizzing us about this patient that we were about to go see. And of course, my colleague was the first one at bat and got the question wrong. And so then the question that the attending asked us was, how much sleep did you get? And I think we mumbled something like 2 hours or something. And he goes, well, that's 2 hours more than you needed. I think it tells you kind of where we were, right? And we've come a long way, but I think we still have a badge of courage, right? Because I think we tend to say, we power through it. I think there's a mindset that we need to still overcome. So I think we still have some work to do.
I totally agree. Vanessa, what is your thinking when it comes to why it matters?
Yeah, I think in research we separate all of these different factors that affect us and why we're not getting the sleep that we need. And there are lifestyle factors, things that are more within our control. So perhaps we're having too much caffeine or alcohol and that's having a negative impact on our sleep. There's also the social media or screen time, as Hon mentioned, and a lack of physical activity that affects some people as well. And then there's other things that are harder for us to control. So there's travel. I think we're probably all experiencing some travel-related sleep deprivation at the moment, and work stress. And what we find is that actually for sleep, stress and anxiety can have such a big impact. And we are leading busier lives, and with that comes work stress and family stress. I'm sure we have all experienced this. I experience this a lot. How stress and anxiety can show up in our sleep is we can have trouble falling asleep and wake up more frequently during the night. And there are some solutions. I know we're talking about tech today. Personally, I like to do meditations and breathing exercises, anything we can do to try to get our stress under wraps, which are in the Samsung Health app as well. So there are things that we can try to do to manage these different things and improve our sleep.
But from a Sleep Foundation perspective, I mean, the organization itself, I think that what Han was saying about there's still a stigma of, on one end, feeling guilty if you have 8 hours sleep, right? And the other side, almost that badge of honor of, oh, I only slept 2 hours, look at me, I can still function.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a change. Where people are starting to tune in more to the importance of the sleep, not just for the physiologic reasons and the connection to other health conditions, but it really does impact the way we see ourselves, the way we interact with other people on the day-to-day. And if you look back a few years, we can look at some directional trends where people were starting to key in more about the importance of their sleep. There was maybe an inflection point around 10 years ago where you could actually see that people were searching more about sleep than they were for other medical conditions. So they're starting, people, the public, are starting to tune in. But it's really fundamental to how we feel about ourselves, how we interact with other people, day-to-day behaviors, and there's a safety component to it as well. So when we talk about sleep health, there's also a sleep health and safety component to it. And that's some responsibility that we have to each other beyond ourselves.
Absolutely, and this is the point that I wanted to kind of move on to, which is, it's not just about us. I mean, I know that from a family perspective, my family feels the pain when I don't sleep enough. But there is also, at work, to your point earlier. So how should we think about that in terms of how sleep matters from a societal perspective versus individual?
I mean, you mentioned safety, which is
Well,
a great
that's a whole nother hour conversation on sleep health and safety. But it does start with ourselves. When we are our best slept self, we have a certain glow. We know how we look and how we feel in the morning. Everyone can relate to a good night's sleep or a poor night's sleep. And that carries on to the people around us. It carries into the workplace. There's been a concept of presenteeism and performance in the workplace, and we have responsibility to our colleagues there, our families. It is pervasive, the effects of good or bad sleep on our lives.
I know that recently I read, I think it was about $400 billion is the estimated cost from poor sleep. And then for the employer, I think it's about $2,000 or so per employee per year. That's a significant amount of economic impact. So it's not just about, but I think I want to get back to what John said, which is, I think we are as human beings relational in nature. We are here to receive care and give care back. I think that's so core regardless of where you are, where you live. And I want to tell you a story about 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago. I had a lot of work stress, to be honest. And so it was about a specific project, and I couldn't sleep for a couple nights of that week. And then I started realizing that my judgment and the way I think about things had changed. I was reacting, not responding to people. And then, thank goodness, it was Lunar New Year, so I had a 3-day weekend or 4-day weekend, and I got some sleep. And I can tell you it was a night and day. Myself knowing, as a physician, knowing what was going on, still not being able to overcome, and that I needed that rest. And so I think that just speaks to what John said. This is about society. We can talk about societal impact in terms of dollars and all that, but really at the end of the day, we're human beings helping each other, and as leaders, we particularly, what we do and what we say matter a lot.
And I think from what Hans said as well, something that might be comforting to everyone here who's struggling with their sleep or feels like they're not getting a good sleep is that we struggle with it as well. People who work in the industry who know all of this stuff. So it is such a common problem. I just want to kind of go back to the economic impact that you mentioned. So my research looks at new graduates, and we kind of identified this as a population who could change perhaps. So college students are well established as a very sleep deprived population, and for all of us who have been through that time in our lives, we can imagine those all-nighters we were pulling, social lives, studying. There's just a lot going on. So we kind of thought, well, if we want to address that $400 billion impact, is the start of your career, or the beginning of the workforce, a good time to do that? It's a fresh start. It's a moment where people are transitioning. So we're trying to put some behavior change programs in that point for our future leaders so they can show up to work, feel great, be productive, develop those skills that they need.
I love that, because we are changing so much with the new generation coming into the workplace as far as what drives them, and the fact that they're very different from my generation, for instance, and so the purpose and everything else. And so starting with the right behavior where, again, you don't have to work, and having that balance is more important. I love that.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's absolutely a call to action. I mean, it's a call to action for a cultural change, and we're kicking off Sleep Awareness Week today, so we're going to ask everybody who's in the audience to actually take this with them for the week and beyond the week. But it's a cultural change, and it is a time to set up good and consistent habits that you can take with you, others can take with them for the rest of their lives. We're doing a lot of work with teens right now, and we'll be releasing some data on sleep health and teens and their mental health this week. But again, there are groups of people in the population where we can start to establish good habits that travel with you.
But that's different. That is different. That's difficult, right? And actually, I'm going to encourage you all to, if you're not so in touch with your sleeping patterns, there's going to be a cute way to understand how you sleep and your relationship with sleep at the reception. Samsung has done something very smart in trying to almost gamify the experience so that you can associate yourself and your sleeping pattern with an animal. So you know what animal you are, and then changing your habits. But, you know, changing those habits is hard. And I think technology over the past few years has really helped us track our sleep, right? And help us figure out a little bit our patterns. But there's your sleep, and then there's our external factors, and I think that's where technology is going as well. What are some of the external factors that can play into, you mentioned things like, you know, caffeine and alcohol, but there's more around that as well, right? The environment you're in and so forth.
Yeah, I think that one thing that tech can do in terms of helping us change our behavior is really be there for those cues. Like a lot of us procrastinate our bedtime and have trouble getting to bed on time. We just get caught up with TV, with work, whatever it may be. So having a watch or a phone where you can have a bedtime alarm, you can get to bed on time. Sleep consistency is one of the most important factors of our sleep, and something that can really help us have consistent good energy levels every day. And my watch is always cueing me to go to bed at a certain time so I can maintain that sleep consistency. So I think having some of these tech cues around our house can really help just with our home environment and with us improving our sleep that way.
I would add that it's a terrific tool. The variety of tools that technology affords us as consumers it's broad. There are many applications for sleep. They're terrific triggers to remind us of things to do, and there's an expansion into how technology can be employed across the whole home. So we're talking about wearable devices, and we're talking about bedside devices and wearable devices. But the way things are going in sleep, there are new doors that are being opened within the home in technology.
I would just add that, at the end of the day, I think many of us know what to do. Whether we choose to do it or not, or able to do it, is another conversation. But, Vanessa, being a scientist, I think I'm going to speak and then have her correct me here. But, I love the COM-B behavioral change model, and that's, I think it's capacity or capability, opportunity, motivation that leads to behavior change. And so as you break down those individual components, you realize that sometimes we just don't have the capacity. We're just sick. We have, stressful lives at work and family. We don't always get the opportunity to do those nudges and changes. And sometimes we just don't have the knowledge of understanding. If people understood that sleep actually clears your toxins from your brain, and then understands that there's a correlation between deep and REM sleep to dementia in a very significant way, would that change behavior? Well, one would hope so, but I think we still have some work to do.
Yeah.
The motivation is what a lot of people struggle with, and I think a lot of us are here, we know that sleep is good for us, we can set aside the time and we kind of have that opportunity, but we just struggle with actually doing the thing, with getting off the couch, getting to bed at the right time, with having a schedule that allows us to sleep, with that kind of thing. So I think the motivation is one that people really struggle with.
Yeah. I would echo that with motivation, what we see when we talk to the public. We talk about the practice of healthy sleep behaviors. As a population, we're grading out at like a D or an F. And they're simple, they're basic healthy sleep behaviors that we all talk about during the day, during the night. But the motivation, so people will know, and we can help people understand, behavior change is doable. It's hard sometimes, but it's doable. And that's the work.
A hopeful message is actually we only need motivation for a small period of time, and then if we actually build the habit and the habit sticks, you can forget about the motivation. It just becomes part of your automatic behavior.
I love that. And I think what I've come to realize is that we have windows in which we have both the capacity and the timing to change. And so we need these nudges at the right moment. And that's where technology comes in.
Absolutely.
And so we can now measure capacity to some degree. For example, our vitality score. We have the ability to use technology to nudge at the right moments in ways that we have not been able to do. So we don't want to sound like we're kind of, sad for the state we're in terms of sleep, because the sleep pattern is getting worse. It's also that we have an aging population, and so how much of it is that versus whether the problem is getting worse, to be determined.
This reminds me of something that you told me the first time that we chatted around sleep, which you were saying how, from a sleep perspective versus, say, nutrition and weight loss, you can actually immediately feel the effect, the positive effect of a good night's sleep, right?
Yes.
It's just keeping that high that we get for a long enough time to make it a habit. And then I wanted to add to what John was saying earlier about smart homes and how, when you're talking about environment as an example, the ability now for technology to sense the room you're in and see, it's not just about caffeine or alcohol, but it's also, was your room too hot? Can you sleep better if it's a cooler environment? And all of that now can be facilitated by technology without us having to work hard to make it all happen. But what I find interesting is when I talk to regular consumers about sleep and sleep tracking, the question that they all go back to is like, well, how do you know I'm asleep? If I'm wearing a watch or a ring that is tracking, how do you know? How do you know I'm asleep?
So the gold reference is what they call PSG, polysomnogram. You go to a lab and they put EEGs on, and using the EEG, we can see the brainwaves and when you fell asleep. We use that as a reference by which we developed an algorithm using signals from the circulatory system, and we can actually get to about 80% plus or minus to actually know when you fell asleep. And so our wearables and others are able to estimate when you fell asleep. We're about 15, 20 minutes probably plus or minus as to when, it's amazing what we can do, and then we can then use machine learning and AI to then look at stages of sleep. So, because what's important is, duration is the perception, but what we realize is that the REM and the deep, which is the most important for brain health specifically, that does not correlate with how well you feel in the morning, which is kind of scary, because what that means is there's a problem of delayed gratification, because the implication of poor sleep is far more consequential than a mere next day, do you feel better or not? That's the issue. To me, we don't understand the cost of the sacrifice we're making. If we could measure that, right? So for example, the epigenome now is able to see the changes in the histones, which sit on top of the DNA expression. And in doing so, we see or we can actually begin to measure what happens when your behavior changes. So I think the days are coming now that we can begin to measure the implication of lifestyle so that we at least have the better opportunity. But again, it comes down to, will you do the right thing?
That's right. That's right.
Well, I know I feel validated sometimes when I look at my data and I feel the way I feel, because sometimes I don't know, maybe it's a fortune thing that I don't look as bad as I feel. So, but there is a little bit of that, right? That the data really brings to life more, really not the feeling, but the impact that bad night's sleep has had on you.
Yeah, there's what you know. And sometimes these data or the scores, they can serve as a pat on the back, give you some directional, some reinforcement. There's what you know. And then to Han's point, there's what you don't know. And we, for a long time, have been, because of the evidence that's growing in the scientific community, been trying to communicate. We've been communicating to the public about the importance of sleep for your health and health conditions. The evidence is there. It's getting stronger. But we don't necessarily understand that. What we understand is how we feel. And so I think what technology can do is it can reinforce both.
So talking about technology, maybe I'm getting overexcited, but obviously, part of the discussion today is AI, and AI is everywhere, and the conversation around what AI can do. I was mentioning earlier that, from a consumer perspective, if it's something that I learned over research, for many years, is that we kind of lazy. Having to work for technology usually doesn't work. So if I have to enter data that says, oh, I had a coffee at 2 o'clock, or data that says, oh, my room was set at 75 last night, I might do it for a week or so, but then I'm going to stop. And the promise of AI is two things. One, that is going to make it much more personal, right? So it's going to be, I have different patterns in my sleep, and my habits are different than all of you. So having the ability to be more personal to me is one. And the second one is that those dotted lines are going to be connected automatically by AI versus me doing it. Am I getting overexcited, or is there something there?
Obviously, I wouldn't be here if I were not excited.
Think you're overexcited.
So, we have things like smart things right now that can control your environment. So, assisting us in developing the regular hygiene, sleep hygiene that's necessary. But AI is changing the game in a very significant way. So, we've used AI to date to create more accurate algorithms to predict different stages of sleep, to get VO2 max and others. So we have been using AI, and we'll continue to use AI in terms of development and enhancement of algorithms. Where we're now moving to with large language models is to look at the benefits of the new Gen AI, which is being able to take massive amounts of data and summarizing it in a way that's understandable. Two, being a navigator, because the complexity of healthcare is just hard. And so it's able to Carolina's point, that it can personalize it for you. Because all of us, I think we know sleep hygiene, you're supposed to do A, B, C, D, but if you sense something about me and it says, it knows me, we respond differently. And so I think that's one of the key areas. And then it nudges me in the tone that I would respond to. And so it's those things that I find really exciting, because I think in ways that the human-computer interface has fundamentally changed, and it's going to get better and better. And the amount of complexity of the healthcare data that's going to be collected now, we have a vision for connected home where we're going to bring not only the data from our devices, but in the broader sense in the home, and being able to bring that and share that data with the ecosystem of partners. So you can imagine the magnitude of the data that we're dealing with, bringing clinical data on top of that. With that, we're really excited about what that's going to reveal.
And I think the promise of generative AI is the habit changing part. The fact that right now I might have some coaching, but it's very basic. Normally I get like, Carolina, you shouldn't have had a cup of coffee at 4. And I was like, well, I know that, but I still needed it, right? But there's more now that we can do as we look at generative AI. Are you excited about
I am
AI?
excited about it, because for me, one of the challenges from a communication and education standpoint around sleep is that everyone's sleep is so different. It's so individual. Our sleep patterns are different, our lifestyles are different, and when we think about behavior change, we're all at a different place with that as well. Some of us may have the opportunity, some of us may have the motivation, but we may not have all three. So it can be really difficult when we're recommending things for people to do, and we have this laundry list of sleep hygiene tips, and some of them apply to us and some of them may not. Like for me, for example, I cannot have a 4 o'clock coffee. That is just a no-go for me, because I would not be able to fall asleep at night. But then you have people people who can have an espresso after dinner and they're perfectly fine. They can just fall right asleep. So there are these subtle differences in our behaviors and how we respond to things that can affect our sleep as well. So I think the promise of AI is that it can deliver that personalization to our own sleep patterns, to our behaviors, and as Hans said, it can customize those messages to us in ways that we will respond to them.
And I think we're at a point where the results of these applications of AI are going to, beget more positive experiences with the users, and the importance of having these positive experiences. The proof's in the pudding. But those positive experiences are also going to generate more confidence and trust in the platform, and that's an opportunity in the tech space, we think, and in the sleep tech space. Is to continue to deliver confidence as people will develop trust in the platforms.
So you stole my question because I wanted to get to the T word of trust,
Oh.
because I do think it's very important, both from a privacy perspective. If we want to share more, and there's opportunity now to even share data that then our physicians have access to. I need to trust the brand that is delivering the technology. Mm-hmm. But then there's also a consistency of the kind of data that I'm getting and the quality of the data that I'm getting, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you did some studying around.
Well, there are a couple things. First, I think that industry is very sophisticated in their continuous improvement and their focus on the performance of their products and services. When we did research with the public around sleep tech, one of the opportunities that we saw was to increase trust in tech. And I think it's consistent with what we've seen in the application of tech to other areas of healthcare or the gathering of healthcare data. So I don't think it's inconsistent with that. But specific to sleep, that's an opportunity for us.
I'm curious if there's a difference as far as, you mentioned younger generation, and whether you see a difference in your research between younger generation and older generation, not just about the relationship with sleep, but also the relationship, obviously, with technology and leaning into technology to help with their fitness and well-being.
Yeah, I think what you would find, particularly with the sleep health study that Samsung did last year, is that it was, I think, the 30s, people in their 30s were the biggest users of the health app and the watch for that study. So there's definitely more adoption in younger generations. And one would hope that with further personalization and AI coming into these behavior change technologies, that could lead to healthier habits down the track for those younger generations as well.
I cannot just not ask you about the ring, so I'm going to ask you about the ring. Obviously, Samsung is betting on diversifying your portfolio, and personally, I think that to the point that we all different, having opportunity to, wear a watch if I want to. Some people don't want to wear a watch when they sleep. Having the ring is that why are you diversifying, or is there something from a ring perspective as a form factor that gives you different better than a watch form factor?
So I think our introduction of this new form factor, our ring,
He's
really
wearing one, by the way.
Is really from listening to our customers. Our customers told us, meet me where I am. And for some of them, less is more. They don't want a screen on their wrist when they go to sleep sometimes. Some are fine, some are not. So I think what we've learned over and over again is that more technology necessarily is not better. And so I think this, for us, we're not trying to be a ring company, right? Or a smart ring company. What we're trying to be is a company that helps care for the health of billions of people with our connected devices and beyond. We think that the only way we're going to really disrupt healthcare in the way we know it today is only going to happen with the ecosystem of people that are innovating. And the data, we don't see it as our data. It's on behalf of the patients, the consumers. They own the data. We have the honor, with their permission, to use it in a meaningful way for both personalization, but also to have insights in ways that we've never understood, to be honest, we're measuring things during sleep that really is predictive of what your health is overall. This is why Samsung is really focused on sleep for the last couple of years. And then the sleep apnea screening that was approved by FDA are further evidence of our commitment and investment in this regard.
Can I just add something to that? When industry makes this kind of investment, we're talking about Samsung today, but when industry makes this kind of investment in a field like sleep health, it really buoys the significance and the importance of the field. It's doing good things for the field of sleep health.
And I think for me, I study screen time, and there's always this kind of delicate balance or dilemma, if you like, between good screens and bad screens, like using technology to track and improve our behavior, but then having screens there and using them to procrastinate our bedtime and have the blue light suppress our melatonin and all the rest of it. And I really love the Ring personally as a form factor because you have that capability there, except you don't have a screen.
That's right.
And options, if I could put that out too. So more tech is not necessarily better. Options in tech is great for consumers. And one of our goals at National Sleep Foundation is that sleep science is rapidly incorporated into technologies, and this is consistent with our goals.
And the Ring, just to mention, will have natural cycle, our strategic partners' ability to measure menstrual cycle, look at fertility windows. Excuse me. And the reason I mentioned that is not only that that's a feature that's going to come with the Ring, along with what we call the vitality score, which is really the first way in which we're able to measure capacity. Remember the COM-B model? We're beginning to look at and decompose how to motivate and get someone to be able to change with AI enhancing that. And so we're looking at it systematically. And last week was International Women's Day. I think most of you may know sleep affects women on average about 10%, 10-15% of the population in general. But once you get to about 40, 50 during perimenopausal windows, it goes to about almost 45, 50% impact of sleep.
Now that's what it is.
It has huge, bada boom. So I think this has huge implications to society. There are companies that are trying to develop medications, and I think these wearables now gives us the tools by which to actually quantify and measure whether our interventions are working or not. We're having conversations with, who's the big medtech company, ResMed, that develops CPAP machines for those that have sleep apnea. Because what they want is, even though they have a medical device, you would think that they would be able to monitor how well the compliance is and whether the CPAP is working or not. They need a wearable in conjunction to help them with that. So I think it's really an exciting time for us in that regard.
Just to piggyback off that, one of the features I love most about wearing my watch while I sleep is it measures my core body temperature, and that does change over the course of your menstrual cycle, and you can have more trouble sleeping at different points in your cycle as well. So one of my dreams for AI is that I can have a connection to my thermostat, or perhaps this is already possible with smart things. Maybe my dreams have already been realized.
So just to clarify, so we measure skin temperature, but we measure the trend of skin temperature that correlates with core temperature changes. So we're not measuring core temperature, but the skin temperature delta is the same fluctuations, and using that, we're pretty predictable in terms of when the fertility window happens. So this will be out with the Ring.
Right. One of my dreams is that can connect to my thermostat.
Yes,
and
and
the
adjust the
temperature in my
temperature.
bedroom
Oh.
can change
Right.
depending on the changes in my
Yeah, so
body temperature.
personally, I think this is probably TMI, but I
Go
wake
for
up,
it.
part of the reason I wake up in the middle of the night is because I get hot. There's a population that overheats for some reason. There's a certain temperature variation during different stages. And to your point, for me, we're looking at companies specifically that can help you thermoregulate in the bed in the smart mattress because it can measure the temperature on the surface of the bed with different sensors in addition to wearables and begin to not only say, this is your profile, this is what's happening, but then the actual connection is you can now thermoregulate to the temperature so that you can get restful sleep. So it's no longer about what is your quality of sleep, it's about getting you to the solution.
Can I just take a quick step back just so make sure we don't miss this to the point you made about obstructive sleep apnea. So National Sleep Foundation, our starting point is general sleep health and wellness in the population. And there are going to be times when people are following our guidance or looking at some of our recommendations and they're still not getting enough of the quality sleep that they need and they need to see a clinician. When we start focusing on sleep disorders, obstructive sleep apnea is a very, very significant consequence to population health. Yeah. So any collaboration, whether it's independent nonprofits like us and the consortiums that we're part of or industry, that's something to keep an eye on, is how we can help improve diagnosis rates and treatment in obstructive sleep apnea.
Yeah, I don't know if people know, about 40% of people who have sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, don't know that they have it.
It's wildly underdiagnosed. Yeah.
Unless you sleep with somebody who does have it, and then you know, right? That's why, yes. I don't sleep because my husband snores, and when he doesn't snore, I wake up because I think he's dead. So, there's just no win-win there.
So
but I think that,
wait, I'm sorry.
Just a caveat, I think people think about loud snoring and so forth, and then I get complaints from my wife as well. But the bigger issue is that people with obstructive sleep apnea or OSA have much higher morbidity, mortality around cardiovascular, particularly stroke. This is not a small issue. Yeah. And so I think that being able to uncover 40% and let them get them to the doctor when needed, I think is a huge step for us.
Yeah. For sure.
I was just going to say that's another hour talk.
Yeah.
But it's something that collectively I think we're all very concerned about and focused on trying to improve.
And I'm not going to ask you about what you think about daylight saving time, because I think that's another hour and a very strong debate.
Here's the guy on the end who wants to steal all your time for the day. But I'll try to keep it. Clock change is bad. Permanent standard time is actually the better fit for our body clocks. We're humans, we're mammals, we're entrained to the sun. And when we apply a daylight saving time scheme, it's kind of a hack. We're prioritizing the social clock rather than the sun clock and our body clock. So National Sleep Foundation very early on said that we're in favor of permanent standard time to stop the clock change and stick with the permanent standard time scheme.
Vanessa, as a scientist, where do you sit on this one?
As a scientist, the permanent standard time, as John said, is the best for our body clock. There's a lot of countries around the world who have already adopted a permanent standard time, and Arizona.
And Hawaii, maybe, yeah?
And I think Hawaii.
Hawaii,
also.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're on the right track, and it would be good to stop the changes. Because what does happen, particularly at this time, where we're more likely to lose an hour of sleep, is that in the next week or two, you see population level statistics where people are more likely to have traffic accidents, heart attacks, these types of medical events that we believe come from this change, are triggered by this change.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I have one last question for you all while you get your questions ready, and I'm going to open up for question in a second. But I said at the beginning, we're all a little fragile and after the hour that has been stolen from us. So if you want the audience to walk away with one key takeaway from this panel and in general, the importance of sleep, what would that be?
It's really hard to prioritize your sleep, but it's so important. Think about that sleep consistency. Try to make time for sleep in your schedule. It may involve cutting some other activities that you enjoy, but I would just encourage everyone to do that. Being Sleep Awareness Week, I'd like to encourage people to do a sleep health checkup. Think about how you have been sleeping and some ways that you can improve that.
I would say that please consider that sleep health is the thread that runs through our most significant health priorities. And similar to that, technology is a thread that really can run through all of the different interventions that we would seek to make to improve our sleep health.
At Samsung, we have a vision to improve the health of billions of people. If you look at sleep, we don't see sleep as a thing you need to rest or simply what are the stages and so forth, but it is the window for our health. And when we more and more look into the data, we're amazed by what we don't know. We're amazed at the opportunity in front of us and the technology that can help us get there.
Awesome. And we have plenty of questions. My takeaway for you is that if you don't want to sleep for you, do it for those around you, because they'll appreciate it. And we're going to open up with questions.
Hi, my name is Flavio Oliveira. I'm a neuroscientist, physician, surgeon who treats patients with sleep issues, and I split part of my time clinically and part of my time in innovation. I like to think of things sort of in a different lens a little bit, and so I'm going to kind of propose a question to the panel on something that I think we didn't touch on. So most of the current approach is to try to measure or improve sleep quality, architecture, etc. But we spend a third of our lives sleeping, and so I'm curious about your thoughts on interventions during sleep that can affect things like learning, memory, emotion regulation, hormone release, and things like that.
Yeah, great question, and thank you for what you do. And this is why we think that digital health is so exciting, is because I think some of what we used to do medications for specific interventions are now turning digital. So I think some of you know about digital therapeutics for insomnia, and then we have slow wave entrainment that's beginning to show some evidence that it might actually lengthen REM sleep. But we're also learning, I had a conversation with Nestle, who had done some studies that showed that nutrition, so carb load, if you eat a high carb load, it actually decreases your deep sleep. And so we're now looking at smart nutrition and saying, can nutrition done in a personalized way actually help with your sleep architecture or how fast you fall asleep, as an example, and there's some evidence that it's beginning to do that. So I think these technologies, when personalized, are beginning to show the impact of the sleep quality. So I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. I would just add that there are probably behavioral things that we can be doing during the day that manifest or benefit us at night. And to the examples that Han gave, anything that we're doing during the day that's going to perhaps enable us to spend the right amount of time in certain stages
I'm
of sleep.
curious about during the night, though, because it's an 8-hour period where you may be stimulated either by temperature changes, touch, sound, olfaction.
A hairless cat that comes and wakes me up, yeah. Got it.
How that will affect what happens. So we're thinking about what we do during the day that affects sleep.
Sure.
But what about what we do during sleep that affects what we do during
The
the
quality.
day?
Yeah. So the slow wave entrainment, as an example, is at nighttime during sleep and extending it, and there will be others that will come along that will help with that.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty novel area of research, and there are some really interesting findings, like in the slow wave entrainment as well. What I would like to see is more research on some of these areas so they can go to market, so people can actually have some really good research-backed ways that they can use that time. But I think, I mean, you have a lot of time during the day and a lot of things that you can do during the day to improve your sleep as well. So I think that ultimately it's probably using that time that you are awake, and perhaps for some people who have certain conditions where maybe they do need to improve their sleep or they're not spending an adequate amount of time in different sleep stages, some of these other interventions overnight could help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I appreciate a lot of the points you've made, and particularly about the ring. I mean, I've worn a smart ring for 4 years now. I've been on a sleep journey. It's really helped me a lot. And but you talk about using it to measure the effects of various interventions. And that gets into, as you were talking about, AI and data. And how does this happen? Is this something that Samsung can do? Is it something that the National Sleep Federation can do? How do we get there? Because technology measuring interventions, probably most of the people in this room are experimenting in different ways. Oh, melatonin, oh, magnesium, oh, CBD. Lots of these experiments, how does that data get consolidated in a way that it becomes real science and a future standard of care?
Yeah, I'll just speak from a Samsung perspective, and then John can give you the right answer. But again, Samsung doesn't think it's our data, right? We fundamentally believe, and we are collaborating right now with organizations to make this data available. It turns out, we have one of the largest natural observational data collection of sleep. Because the problem we have with gold reference data is that it's PSG level data. It is more accurate, but it's in lab in an artificial setting where we're getting 4 plus or minus hours to measure and get diagnosed. And so our vision is this, that we would continue to collect that data with permission from the users and then make that available for life science and other companies, not to sell the data, but learn from that data, particularly with the National Sleep Foundation and other organizations that can bring credibility and that kind of independent thinking so that we can begin to understand the interventions and the implications of these interventions and whether they work or not.
Right. And from the National Sleep Foundation interest, we would want to see more companies, like Samsung, like what Han is explaining, sharing data that they collect. And if it can go into a repository, whether that's something that National Sleep Foundation somehow manages, but culturally, that we get to a point where we're actually sharing these data, we're bringing them together from different sources. And then an organization like ours, we can also get in and look at these results of objective data, let's say, compare them to what we're seeing at the population level when we're talking to the public. We can start to, the beauty in data is when you start to see things that are aligning.
Great. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to your point, I think it's really difficult if people are making choices to have melatonin or magnesium or whatever it may be. It is really hard to infer that that is then good for your sleep based on someone's personal experience. And I think it's really tough with even wearables to say that this is good for you or good for people in general, because all of the conditions are so different. People are taking different doses. People are doing different things all during the day. So I think for a lot of people, people come up and say to me all the time, oh, I do X and it improves my sleep. And that's great if you figure that out for you, but from a scientific perspective, it's really difficult to actually say
Takes
that
more.
as a general thing.
Yeah, we'll ultimately use prospective data to do randomized clinical trials to make these decisions at some point, but I think there's still something to be learned in a large study to say what are the signals that are there or not. And then from there, I think, like Vanessa said, I think you do have to do some more rigorous clinical trials.
Yeah, and just one last thing, and then I'll go, is just the organizations that are working on brain health. You talked about how critical sleep is for dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, other things. Those would be great organizations to partner with going forward.
Absolutely, and we have an open innovation model where we actually partner with MIT, Brigham Women's, specifically for this reason. We're not a brain science company, right? That's not who we are, and so we have to partner. We think it has to come together in a way that brings the best of the different specialties, including patient advocacy groups, for us to do the right set of things.
I wish I had a propranolol right now. I'm so happy. I have never been a maid of honor. So I'm Jen. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm lucky enough to have idiopathic hypersomnia. Yeah. So I was wondering if you guys could, assuming that a lot of the people in this room maybe don't know what idiopathic hypersomnia is, if you could just talk about the excessive sleepiness disorders and how they suck. I can't take Xyrem because I'm already depressed and I live alone. So, and I'm fighting with very feisty ADD patients to get my medications filled. So, yeah, I was just wondering if you could use this area to kind of touch on that. And my peeps. And narcolepsy sounds so much like cooler. It's so annoying. And IH doesn't get as much funding. It's so sad. But yeah.
Well, first of all, we hear you, and there are others who are living with IH, and it is different from narcolepsy. It is a rare sleep disorder. And I think there's really only one medication that's, right at this point, that's approved
it's like
for
Rufus,
treatment.
yeah.
And I think you just shared that you're not able.
Because I live alone. So it's, for lack of a better term, it's roofies. It is, basically. And because I live alone, if I was to take it and like there was a fire or something,
Right.
I don't know if my cat Steven would wake me up. I would hope
It's
so.
a cat, so no is the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So like that's the reason I can't take it.
Sure. I would just quickly ask, and I don't want to dominate the conversation. Are you in touch with, there's a Hypersomnia Foundation. They provide a lot of support and a lot of insight.
Yeah. It's just I just find that so many of the studies are focused on narcolepsy. So, yeah.
Well, I would be happy to spend time if you want to after the session, and
Yeah, during the reception.
and sure, and we
Yeah.
can
Join
talk
us.
about it, and I can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, there are a number of advocacy
Yeah.
groups, so yeah, we'd be happy to share those as well if you want to be connected.
I just want to add, thank you for being vulnerable.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you for sharing.
Yeah.
I think this is how we increase awareness, and for me, I think your message makes me more passionate about the work that I do. So thank you.
My mother was like, I was raised by a theater mom, so I'm very dramatic. But it is a very like invisible disability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to I have to tell my manager so many times. She gets so mad at me when I am not doing enough. And it's like, Catherine, do you want my brain? So
Well,
Yeah.
let's connect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And thank you for the work that
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello, my name's Wesley. I had a
Wesley.
question for John. Actually, two questions. You know how important sleep is, apparently, right? Some employers do not. So,
Yes.
from all your conversations with different groups, different companies, what is the thing that kind of wins them over the most? Is the first question.
Employers?
Employers.
Yeah.
The second is, as the head of a company that really does understand, or a foundation that does understand the quality of sleep, what are the things that you do to ensure that your employees get enough sleep? What are the
I love
practices?
this
Oh,
question.
great question. John's on the spot.
On the spot.
Putting the boss on the spot. But let me please answer your first question. Some of the themes to emphasize with employers around sleep health are around general health, performance, safety, cost savings.
Yep.
If you can articulate those, and we can help provide some resources around that. And I'm not sure if you're thinking about a particular industry.
No, the top four works.
But I think that's what those are the messages that you really want to pay off with employers.
And I think if you start shoving the dollars, usually that's where.
All of those translate into dollars.
Right. And the second question?
Second question is, we have a culture around sleep health. When we are in launch mode, sometimes it requires more than a 8-hour day. But because we're in the sleep space, we give our employees a lot of time that they need if they need to make up for hours. We give people time off when they're putting in long days. We're neck deep in the promises of sleep health, so our staff know the benefits of sleep. I don't know if you're thinking about a particular intervention that we might do.
I don't know if it sounds like you culturally hand the reins for them to make their own choices, but I don't know if there's any nudging enforcement like we have a deadline, so the next week everyone has a week off, or you hand out Samsung Galaxy rings to everyone and saying like share your sleep timing or whatever, and you give a prize.
It's not quite available yet, so that hasn't.
I'm just like, what are the mechanisms that you? I understand you have a culture, but what are your enforcement or reinforcement mechanisms that you
Well,
build in?
I think I'll be the first one if I'm seeing a late night email or text
Yes.
to try to put the brakes on that. If it's something that can wait till the next day. There are times when we have to respond at different times, but culturally,
Gotcha.
and it's tough when we're doing communications as well. But we don't need to be burning the midnight oil for work. So that's something that we've kind of instituted culturally. In terms of providing our own employees with technology, maybe that's something we should think about.
So actually, we at Samsung, we have our internal Knox messenger that allows us to securely communicate. And when it's nighttime at the other end, because we're a global company, it tells you, do you really want to send this message now? Or it'll say, it's after hours, do you really want to send this? And so I think we can work technology in such a way that does, enforce, because you do need some reinforcement.
Yeah.
Two other things I'll add. A lot of companies do have wellness programs, which in turn can help you sleep if they have things in the workplace like yoga, meditation, things like that.
Yeah.
But if there are any managers here listening right now, one thing that I would encourage you to adopt is a flexible start time, because socially we are living in an early birds world. But a lot of us here are night owls,
Yes.
and it's really, really tough to start work at 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. So a
Yep.
flexible start time can really do wonders for some people in your team.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Good questions.
Maybe one last question. Really appreciate a lot of the reflections
there's
on
more.
the potential
I
for
see you.
technology and AI, and especially with wearables to impact sleep. I think from my experience and a lot of experience of my network, there's been challenges in the practicality, I guess in the immediate term. A couple of the challenges that I've seen a lot are, one, the accuracy. So at one point, I think I was wearing an Oura Ring, an Apple Watch, and had an 8-sleep mattress, and they were all showing different sets of sleep data. And so it's this question of how accurate is any one data set? And then I think the second challenge that I've heard a lot is that sometimes looking at the data more and being more conscious of sleep can actually make you overthink it more and actually see sleep suffering as you're tracking it more. And so would love to just hear reflections on kind of that translating to practicality gap of where we are and kind of how you see that potentially being overcome.
One thing we were all talking about before we walked in is orthosomnia, which is this obsession with data and looking at your sleep data and just trying to optimize it. And there are some characteristics, traits that people have. People who are more anxious or more neurotic don't necessarily gel well with wearables because they will be doing that. But one thing that I would emphasize for people who may be like that and for everyone in general is to look at the trends, because even if those night-to-night measurements are slightly different from brand to brand, the trends will probably be the same over time, and that's where you can see what your sleep has been like, behavior change techniques that you're using working, and just really getting a good idea of where you're at by looking at the trends.
In terms of the data accuracy, I can share with you that, I think every company, including Samsung, has to be accountable for how the algorithms get developed, what the evidence is, and so we'll publish those, but for the consumer, you're at unfortunately, different algorithms are developed in different ways, so you're going to get some differences. And everything should be based on the reference, which is a PSG, which is EEG based. And so, I don't know how to solve that problem, to be honest, but I think that it's based on how close is it to a reference gold standard.
I mean, really quickly from the NSF standpoint, we work with the Consumer Technology Association to set standards for devices. But I think the other question is, well, so what is someone looking for in that feedback? I'll think about myself. So I'll look at different scores, and a score in one device might not be the same as a score, but what am I trying to take away from that? And for me, is it relatively good, is it relatively bad? What is it that I did the previous day? What did I do during the night that helped me get either a relatively good or relatively bad score? So I think it depends also on what you're looking for in the feedback that's coming back from the devices.
Great, thank you.
Do we have one more? Oh, he told me I'm not allowed. Are you coming and join us at the reception so you can ask your question? I hope so. Okay.
Yeah, we'll be there. We'll talk to you at the reception.
Thank you so much for being here. I do really encourage you to go to the reception, enjoy the food, and check out the tech, and do the test for your animal, sleep animal. And I hope you enjoyed this morning session.
Yeah, we did. Thank you.